Hello and welcome to Motorsport Speak, the weekly motorsport podcast brought to you by the team behind Motorsport Week and Motorsport Monday. We're here back talking all things electric. I'm here with our Formula E editor Jack Smith, and we're going to discuss the inaugural Misano E-Prix, a doubleheader in Italy in the sunshine where there was drama, controversy, pelotons, and all sorts. But Jack, first of all, you were trackside. How are you? And how was it?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thank you. Yeah, it was really good. I mean, from a journalist point of view, it was a fantastic venue to be at, just because it's a purpose-built circuit. So you've got, um, a really good base there to do everything, and it's good for the fans once you're inside the venue as well. But obviously, it's a little bit tucked out of the way, so it may have been a bit tricky for people to get there initially. And I'm sure, as we'll come to at some point, the track itself was not entirely popular with the drivers. But it was a really good weekend. It was a very exciting race, of course, in lots of ways. Maybe not all the best ways, but yeah, it was a really really interesting weekend. But it always is in Formula E.
Let's start by talking about race one, which is probably where I think the most drama occurred. Mitch Evans got pole. I think the fan vote said that I think he was the majority favourite to win the race according to the television viewers, but that didn't transpire. Mitch Evans ended up fifth, and the winner across the checkered flag was Antonio Felix da Costa in his Porsche, but he wasn't the winner by the end of Saturday evening, which we will come to. And the reason Evans obviously didn't win was because of the nature of the Misano circuit. We weren't at a street circuit, we were at a more flowing track, which meant energy conservation was the name of the game. And it meant we got a peloton, a Portland style peloton with people jockeying for position, essentially jockeying not to be at the front for the majority of the race. And it was probably win by going as slow as you possibly could until the last few laps where people pulled the pin to try and make sure they were the ones with the prizes, the champagne, and the trophies by the end of it. Da Costa did a very good job, but unfortunately, he was disqualified for a illegal throttle dampener spring. A strange irregularity, to put it mildly. And Roland was the one who ended up with the win. But what were before we get on to your thoughts on that? What were your general thoughts on the race and the way it played out?
Well, as I wrote in my race report, the racing in the first few laps, because there were cars just four abreast, and not just down the main straight into turn one. They were like it for most of the lap, and I wrote that it just sort of resembled a sort of a booze fueled gaming lobby because it just looked so incredibly bizarre. Um, which again was not what popular with the drivers. From an entertainment point of view, it was quite good. I mean, obviously the drivers were jockeying for position so much, probably more than Portland actually. And I suspect when the numbers come out about the overtakes, I suspect it probably broke a Formula E record. Um, but the race itself was interesting. Obviously, Mitch Evans being on pole did not guarantee him a good result. And he was before the race slightly playing down his hopes, even before qualifying. Um, and yeah, Da Costa did he drove. It was a brilliant race, and it just showed all of his experience. He started 14th. Um, Strategically, Porsche got it right, and he ended up being the first one over the line. And again, Jake Dennis did another great race, qualifying really badly down towards the back, coming in third. And Roland again just showing his consistency and showing why all the other rivals are talking up Nissan when Nissan aren't talking themselves up. But yeah, Da Costa drove fantastically, and it was a really, really important performance and result for him because with all the speculation going around about the future of his drive with Porsche for next season, and you could tell that with what he said on the radio after crossing the line. It was a very personal race for him, and he was obviously incredibly buzzed about winning. Went and jumped in the pool after the race, Danny Rick style, and then it all kind of went crashing down after that.
As you say, it was vitally important for Da Costa to get that win. It's not been the smoothest start to the season for him. Hasn't really been picking up very many points, whereas his teammate Pascal Wehrlein's been contending for the championship right at the front of the standings. And I think the call over the line when he won was quite an emotional plea, given the news that Porsche have been testing rival Nico Muller. But then it all got taken away from him late Saturday evening. It's not a performance related part. It's just the spring behind the throttle pedal, which is a sort of a comfort thing for drivers. And it was an old outdated spring that Porsche had on Da Costa's car that's no longer permitted. Yeah, it was a strange one, and it seems to be a bit unfair that it resulted in a disqualification. That seems to be the overall mood in the paddock. Would that be your verdict?
Oh yeah, I mean, Da Costa himself replying to the official announcement on FE's Instagram page, he sort of alluded to the fact that Porsche may not be the only team running this damper spring because just because of the way the parts are catalogued and all of that. Um, so he's potentially opened a can of worms for the FIA to scrutinise it a little bit further. Um, there's also other whispers going around about, the FIA generally wouldn't scrutinise something in quite that detail. So why they went and looked at it in the first place, I'm not entirely sure. But yes, it's more of a technicality than anything else. It wasn't going to give him a performance advantage. And I think the overriding consensus of everyone was that um, if the FIA had said, "Look, this is what we found," slap on the wrist, but you can keep your win, but just don't do it again. I think that would have been considered very, very fair, and I don't think anyone would have had any complaints with that. Roland and Dennis actually said afterwards that the day belonged to him, and Roland didn't really want to get his first win of the season in that style, but. So yeah, I mean, obviously, it was just one of those situations where it seems like he can't catch a break. He's struggled to Costa a bit with the Gen 3 car. And he has actually shown some consistency as the season's gone on. He looked pretty good in Sao Paulo as well. And he drove quite well in Tokyo. It's just sometimes these performances get a little bit lost amongst everything else that goes on. But Nico Muller has shown a lot of pace. He did this weekend in what's, wouldn't say it's one of the best cars on the grid. So you can see why Porsche are looking at him. They've obviously got to think about a team's championship and a manufacturer's championship. But I think that Da Costa probably showed this weekend in that race and then the last couple of races that they should probably stay with him as he pleaded over the radio.
But yeah, it was a shame for Da Costa, obviously, what happened there, especially considering what happened to him in race two, and he ended up with a scoreless weekend. But it meant that Roland, he said it wasn't the way he wanted to pick up a win, but it's how he picked up his first win of the season, and he's sort of firmly in the title conversation now. You were saying in our conversation before the podcast that Roland's sort of quietly accepting that he's in the title hunt.
Yeah, I mean, the thing in Formula E, and I don't think it's a case of mind games. I think it's just a case of how unpredictable it is and how aware everyone is of that, and that they're so cagey that they generally try and talk up their rivals rather than them talk up themselves. We saw that earlier in the season where Jaguar looked like they were the overwhelming favourites due to, at that point in the season, very consistent performances. But they were talking about how good everyone else was. Um, and it seems to me that now uh, a lot of people are talking up Nissan.
Mm.
I spoke to Ollie before FP1 on Friday. He kind of more or less discounted himself from the title race. And then after um, race one, even before he was given the win, um, he sort of begrudgingly accepted that, they might have to start thinking about themselves being in contention. Um, and I think they are firmly in there. The car's very good over one lap, the Nissan, and the race pace is generally pretty good too. We saw that in Tokyo as well when he was very, very close to winning. It just fell away from him at the end. So I think, yeah, he's very much in contention. And I think that everyone's also talking up Porsche as well, just because it seems to me that their powertrain is overall the most consistent and the best one. Um, Whether the Andretti's qualify badly compared to the Porsche or not, they do show very good pace in the races itself. So it is wide open, and I think that a lot of drivers can be considered for still being in the hunt. You can't discount Jaguar out yet either, because I'm sure they will bounce back on circuits that suit them a bit more.
The bottlenecking chicane, I guess you could call it, because you were saying there's obviously cars going four wide and then they trying to funnel into this tight sort of chicane that had been sort of manufactured for the Misano circuit to alter it to Formula E specifications. And Jean-Eric Verne and Cassidy came to blows there. Cassidy eventually ending up with a DNF and Verne ending up with a penalty. Could have been a racing incident. I mean, it's hard to give competitors space when there's not that much space on the track to begin with. But what was your verdict there for the Verne Cassidy clash?
It's a bit of six of one, half a dozen of the other. I mean, as you said, there's a lot of jockeying for position, and I think Jev has a reputation for getting his elbows out, and he always has done. That probably even goes back to his F1 days. So I think sometimes he gets targeted a little bit more than he should do. But a lot of drivers have already commented this season, even back in Diriyah, I think one driver, I can't remember who it was that he tangled with, said that maybe it was sort of going across the line of being fair. But I think on this occasion, he probably could have been given the benefit of the doubt. He was pretty incredulous when I spoke to him after the race. He said it was the most unfair penalty he'd ever received, including his karting days. But it was a disappointment, really, probably even more so, given that the Penske was scintillating over one lap,
Yeah.
and it could have been a far more successful weekend for them, and it kind of fell away in the races. But I think that probably the inclusion of their new deputy team principal in Phil Charles is probably showing that there's a lot of really good improvements coming from that car. And maybe it also shows maybe why Jaguar have fallen away, given that that's where he left to join Penske.
Obviously, you're talking about improvements there for DS Penske. Also improvements for ERT. Fourth place in race one with Dan Ticktum, and then sixth in race two of Sergio Sette Camara, showing that, like, obviously, as ever with Formula E, the form book can be torn up, and those teams that are struggling at the back can have their moments in the sun. I think it especially helped when there's these type of peloton races where obviously qualifying or overall pace may not have everything to do with it, and sort of driver nous can come into play. Moving on to race two, 2 laps shorter, if I'm correct,
Yeah.
to sort of mitigate, I guess, energy and all those shenanigans there. But Roland had a great day on Saturday, and it looked like he could be doing the double and be the first repeat winner of the year, but it didn't come to pass. Running out of energy on the final lap, which meant that Porsche's prowess was sort of firmed up with Pascal Wehrlein instead becoming the first repeat winner following his season opener Mexico success. So Wehrlein inherited the win after, again, it was these sort of Porsche powertrains, I think, across the weekend definitely looked the most, sort of the strongest, perhaps best at managing these type of race conditions. So Wehrlein picked up the win, and it was heartbreak for Roland. And you said there was an explanation behind it. It wasn't just poor race management.
No, not at all. Ollie said after the race that it was a software glitch that caused a miscalculation. So when he crossed the line at the start of the race, it counted one lap less when it shouldn't have done so. By his reckoning of the data, it was they had more energy left. But he was also aware that that was very likely and he could run out at any moment. But he said that when the car was going through the corners, it still felt like there was quite a lot of juice left in it. But watching the race, you could see that he was pulling away from Wehrlein with very little left in the car. So you kind of felt that he and Nissan had either called this brilliantly or they'd gone way too early. But of course they had, due to the software glitch. He was very philosophical about it though, because he still comes away still very much in the championship battle. I mean, obviously, if he had won the race, he would have had quite a buffer. But he was genuinely quite pleased, I think, with how the weekend went. And so could Nissan. I mean, Fenestraz got his first points of the year as well, after a pretty good drive. But yeah, the Porsche strategy was absolutely bang on in both races. Obviously, Wehrlein was able to keep his win. And I think that just showed that not only do they have a very good team that sorts out the strategy, it is the best powertrain on the grid. The two Jaguar drivers, Evans and Cassidy, said that they are way behind them in terms of performance and overall consistency of it. So Porsche, did come away with more to be happy about. And Verline said in the presser after the race that they just reset everything. They weren't going to dwell on what happened on a Saturday, and they just were going to go again. And I think he maybe even doubted the strategy that they gave him, but he admitted that that was completely wrong on his part. And yeah, comes away leading the championship jointly on points with Jake Dennis. So the championship is still massively open as they go into the Monaco race.
Yep, and I'd say Jake Dennis was probably my driver of the weekend. 17th to second on the Saturday, 9th to second on the Sunday. So he's getting over his qualifying foibles and he's being just supremely consistent. So that's 3 podiums on the bounce for him now, with including Tokyo, and tied on points with Verline. Kind of the same of what he did last year, and that's how his title run was so successful. He was Mr. Consistent, was Jake Dennis, and I think watching his sort of review of how he got through the field in race one, you could see like he's just a shrewd operator. So I think what we've got obviously an amazing title fight, I think, on our hands, and it's between multiple drivers. You see Nick Cassidy still there, fourth in the title hunt, despite Jaguar's sort of patchy form and the poor luck that they've had. I guess the peaks are high and the troughs are low, but and then Gunter's in there as well, despite not picking up points in that second race. And obviously Roland is being supremely consistent in this. And it's good to have. We've got a top five, top six even in the championship is all from different teams. So it's a very exciting championship picture playing out. But quickly talking about the overall weekend and Misano's debut, it was an interesting choice, in my opinion, for a Formula E circuit because Misano, I think, by its nature, is quite flowing in terms of its layout. There are technical sections to it, mainly the normal sector one, which Formula E had to bypass in terms of creating its layout, and there's portions of the final sector as well, which are quite tight and twisty. But there was sort of no real way to utilize the best braking zones on the Misano circuit for the benefit of Formula E. And the layout they ended up with, and tends to be the layout, and tends to be what happens when they have traditional circuits, is that it creates these peloton races because energy conservation is difficult, and then obviously that becomes a catalyst for incidents and crashes and what have you. The calendar is skewing more towards traditional circuits as opposed to street circuits, where Formula E really does make a name for itself and appears to be the most at home. But as Gen 3 is more powerful than previous generation of car, and Gen 3.5 is going to be more powerful, and obviously Gen 4 is going to be more powerful, the calendar is slowly turning towards these type of venues such as Misano. What was your thoughts overall on Misano as a Formula E venue, and I guess tie that into how the drivers felt about it as well?
Um, from my perspective, it's the jury's out on whether it's going to be a viable Formula E venue because, as you say, it's very fast and flowing. Mitch Evans said that the circuit is flat as a pancake, so it very much lacks the common characteristics of a Formula E circuit. Obviously, we went from Tokyo with dips and cars going off all four wheels off the ground in certain parts of it to a track like this. It's completely different. I think Mexico has more scope to have an adaptability to be more like a Formula E circuit, which is why I think we had a pretty good race there. Whereas I think this was sort of completely in the other direction. One thing that the driver spoke about before the race and afterwards or during the weekend, and this is something that they've said so much that I'm actually doing a feature article about it, in that a lot of the drivers said that it's just not in keeping with the DNA of the series.
Mm.
And I get that, it's been a street-based series, and this is completely removed from that. But on the flip side, I think probably from more of a cynical perspective, it's easier for Formula E to host these races because it's more cost effective and it's easier to organize because you don't have to go through the logistical nightmare of shutting a city down, or in the case of Monaco, pretty much the whole country. But it's also a case of getting the balance right. And that's what everyone said. James Barkley, the team principal of Jaguar, said, you need to have a balance in everything. And I think if the Gen 4 cars are going to become more powerful and more efficient, then you're probably going to see more circuits like this appear on the calendar, because it's just a case of whilst the drivers don't like it, there's also the added fact that a series like Formula E is probably just going to keep growing because the more powerful the cars get, the more you're probably going to have to adapt the street circuits as well.
Hmm.
I just think that maybe going to Misano was maybe a little bit too early,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't be surprised if they go back.
Yeah, yeah, I'd say I would agree with you, maybe too early, but I think with Gen 4, and if it's more efficient and more powerful, which it most definitely probably will be, then you won't see the drivers complaining as much because they'll probably be singing the praises of the car, and if it's better suited to the tracks, then there won't really be that issue. And obviously, yeah, you touched on it there in terms of like if that is the case, the Gen 4 cars will basically outgrow the venues that Formula E has sort of made its home. And sort of that's a good way to segue into some news or rumours that emerged in the build up to the Misano race is that the British round of Formula E, which is currently the London E-Prix, which has made its peculiar home in the Excel Exhibition Centre in London, in a sort of tight, twisty 1 mile layout that goes inside the Excel Centre itself and outside and around it. There's talks that this year could be the final year that Formula E heads to London to that venue, and that Silverstone might be sweeping in to take the British round of the Formula E Championship, which I guess will invite all sorts of similar comparisons and similar worries as Misano did, because Silverstone, it's a very fast and flowing circuit. I would suppose they would use the national circuit layout with the old start finish straight down to Cops, and then rather than taking Maggots and Beckett's, you cut back through and down the Wellington Straight, and obviously sort of Luffield and Woodcote and everything like that. But still, that's not there's not really a whole host of braking zones on offer there either. I mean, you could maybe start at Abbey, go to Village, cut down the Hanger Straight, take Stowe, Club and Vale and all that. But I think we'll have similar problems until obviously a Gen 4 car turns up. But what are your thoughts on the possibility of Formula E heading to Silverstone? And again, I think we're talking about Formula E being in cities, which makes it great for fans to attend and easy to get to, rather than an airfield in the middle of Northamptonshire, which isn't exactly an it's not an urban cityscape uh, in terms of getting to it. It's not particularly easy either. But yeah, drivers have had some concerns about that one as well, haven't they?
Oh yeah, and I think Mitch Evans said to me on Friday that the idea of going to Silverstone is ludicrous,
Mm.
um, and I think it is. I mean, it may even be a bit too, it certainly be too soon for Gen 3. And the thing is, Misano, as I touched on at the start, is not the easiest place to get to, but it's not that far removed from the town of Misano. It's not far from the towns that are nearby. It took me about 15 minutes to get from my hotel in the next town to get to the circuit. Um, so it was pretty hassle free. To go to an old airfield, virtually in the middle of nowhere, particularly in a series that is still on not on the fringes, but there is a certain niche element to it.
Mm.
Particularly in Britain, I've started to realise it's still not as massive in Britain as it could be, and maybe is in other countries. So I think the idea of going to Silverstone is a bit of a risk. I'm pretty sure there are other circuits in Britain that they could go to. I mean, there's probably plenty of scope on the British Touring Car Championship calendar, for example. So you have to find somewhere that's near a built-up area if you're going to go to a purpose-built circuit, or you look at the possibility of still ditching London and maybe going to another British city. I mean, there's plenty of them where you probably could do this.
Mm.
Um, so I
The
think,
Birmingham Super Prix that they used to have. I think that
well,
was what
yeah,
it was
there's
called. But revive that, but for Formula E, that could work.
that's a great example because I've seen clips of that race actually, and that was there was something about it that was very similar to like Macau. So you could do something like that, and it provides another British city to get a cracker hosting it. Um, yeah, I think as I'll probably echo what Mitch Evans said, which is that they're probably going to have to think carefully about where they choose these venues to be. I'm not necessarily
Mm.
against the idea of purpose-built circuits, particularly with what I know about the Gen 4 car and the fact that the races are going to get longer probably as well, just because they can. Um, so I'm not discounting out going to a British circuit. I just don't think Silverstone is the right one.
No, I mean, in terms of layout, if off the top of my head, if I'm thinking of a British purpose-built circuit with a layout that would suit a Formula E car, I would probably say Snetterton. Because ever since Snetterton was updated, um, it's got a lot of braking zones and sort of tight, twisty, complex sections that would, I think, be perfectly suited to Formula E. The only problem with Snetterton is that it's in a sort of far out area, and it's not particularly the best circuit for spectators, although it has excellent car parking. But that's not important. For Silverstone, I would say it would be vital for them to package the event appropriately, to treat it as, I guess, I mean, the way they do with Formula One, they make it like a festival, don't they? There's a lot of added on elements. There's a lot of other events going on, and I think maybe you could use it. You would need something else to maybe complement the action to pull people in. I mean, obviously, in the past, they've hosted World Rallycross, for example, and World Rallycross has in recent years featured electric vehicles. I mean, for the past few seasons, it was an all-electric vehicle championship. World Rallycross is now a balance between electric and internal combustion engine cars. There is no British round on the calendar, but maybe that would be a way to sort of package an event of having something else there as well to obviously give people a reason to depart from the city and head to Silverstone. Talking of support packages or added content, there was supposed to be a support race in Italy this weekend. Electric minis for drivers 15 to 25 of the next gen cup. But at the 11th hour, the support series was pulled from under the rug. I think the organisers of the next gen cup, they cited unforeseen circumstances with getting onto the Formula E calendar, which is a massive shame, I think, for Formula E because it would greatly benefit from having a support series just because in terms of visiting fans, it's something extra for attendances to, as we're saying, be attracted to, and also for the drivers were going to be 15 to 25. That's sort of a talent pool for future Formula E drivers. But yeah, not a great look overall, really. That series pulled out at the last minute.
No, and it was a great shame because I was looking forward to taking it in over the weekend. Yeah, I mean, I think there was a little bit of caginess with some of the people at Formula E explaining what went wrong. There were rumours about whether there were enough drivers interested in driving in it. I don't
Mm.
think that's probably true, though, to be fair, because a lot of drivers had been cited. Um, I think they Formula E, I think, will admit that it was a challenge from the NXT Cup's point of view that it was quite hard to put it together from when they actually originally asked them. So it was probably quite a close run thing to get everything ready. But the important thing is that Jeff Dodds, the CEO of Formula E, did say on Friday that um, they would be very happy to have them back next season if the circumstances allow. So I don't think we should discount it appearing in the future. And I, for one, would like to see it appear. It would be good for Formula E to have a support series. And fingers crossed they can get it together for next season because not only is it something for young drivers to get themselves involved in, but from Formula E's point of view, it was also very good for the fact that it was going to be a mixed gender championship,
Yep.
which was also going to um, help Formula E's initiative, help Formula E expand the Girls on Track initiative, which was
Yeah.
something that the Next Gen Cup was going to do. So they're hoping to have them back, and I hope it will come back. It's just a shame that they kind of maybe went a little bit too early, a bit too much too soon. But yeah, hopefully that it will be back next year.
Yeah, it's always because Formula E doesn't really have. I mean, in sort of classic single seater racing, there's or traditional single seater racing rather. There's just a plethora of series, and there's a very extensive ladder that's wide ranging. I mean, you start off with sort of you come out of karting. There's British Formula 4. There's, if we're talking from obviously from our perspective as British people, there's like the GB3 Championship, and then obviously you progress to things like Spanish and Italian Formula 4. There's obviously the Formula Regional by Alpine. And then obviously, you could progress and there's FIA Formula 3 and then there's Formula 2 and then there's Formula 1. It's sort of, Formula E doesn't really have that. It's almost like they could do with when Gen 3.5 comes in, that they should have a support series championship with maybe like sort of detuned Gen 3 cars or something to have a sort of a Formula E point two or something, to have a proper junior series of like, similar spec cars. Um, a Formula 2 equivalent, if you will. I'm not sure whether that's viable or possible at this early stage for Formula E, only being 10 years young. But in terms of obviously talking about rookies and the talent pipeline, there was a rookie test, first one of the year. I think that also had great relevance because obviously there's going to be a bunch of drivers who are going to miss Berlin. But overall, what were your impressions of the rookie test? And did any of the drivers stand out?
Yeah, I think there was a quite a lot of the drivers did stand out actually. I think the ones that are going to be standing in Berlin for when some of the drivers are away for the WEC, or obviously it was valuable track time for them. There were obviously a couple of Red Bull Junior drivers there as well, and I think that is another aspect of it actually, is that, as sort of you touched on about it not having a support series, I think that what Formula E is providing is not to be a sort of a consolation prize, but it is a series that, as the F1 drivers last week in Japan sort of touched on, it's a series that drivers can go into if circumstances arise that they can't get into Formula One.
Mm.
Because obviously in Formula One, you've got, especially now, you have 10 teams that generally don't seem to want to have another one on the grid. Um, and that limits the amount of opportunity some drivers get. So I think it's always good for these drivers to keep Formula E in mind as a creditable career option. I mean, even Alex Albon, I think, recently said that he was very close to signing
Yeah.
a contract to be in Formula E before Red Bull came knocking for him. So yeah, I think the junior tests are very, very important. I think it was good that there were some drivers that maybe more lay people weren't aware of. I mean, last year we had Daniel Kvyat in a rookie test in Formula E.
In terms of, you touched on it there actually, with Formula One not being sort of welcoming to new teams or new outfits. One thing they are welcome to is new engine manufacturers, new power unit manufacturers, and Formula E is obviously no stranger to that, having recently welcomed Lola Yamaha into the fold for next season, and they announced the team that they'll be partnering with as a power unit supplier, or power train supplier, should I say, in Formula E terms, and that's the Abt Cupra squad. So yeah, just talk a little bit more about that and sort of how both parties see that partnership moving forward.
So yeah, it's going to be Apt specifically that they're partnering with from next season. And Lola, I spoke to their motorsport director Mark Preston over the weekend, and he made it very clear that Lola's first objective was to get into Formula E because of their new CEO's sort of three-pillar plan to get into motorsport. Was all about being sustainable. So Formula E was sort of a natural first port of call for them, really, since they've sort of relaunched. But having someone like Mark Preston is a really big statement of intent, actually, because he's someone that is known to people in Formula E. He's worked in it for a long time. He worked in Formula One for many, many years as well. In fact, in Formula One and Formula E, he both worked for Super Aguri. So his contacts in Japan was what helped secure a partnership with Yamaha.
Yep.
And it was Yamaha that their last sort of venture into top level four-wheel motorsport was something he was involved in, was when they supplied engines to Arrows back in 1997. So it's a very interesting partnership. Ab supposedly had talks with Porsche about a powertrain supply deal, something it obviously didn't quite work out there. But it's quite ambitious. Lola have said that they want to be competitive, very competitive, sort of within the first couple of years. They've already taken delivery of a Gen 3 Evo car to work with, and they're aiming to be testing by June. So even before the season is over, they're going to be testing the cars. They get 12 days of track test time a season. It seems like they've put a lot of thought into it, which is really good. It shows that they're being very level-headed about the project. And given the nature of Formula E and how competitive it is, and the fact that there's sort of quite a sort of an incestuous nature, in, if you like, in how a lot of the parts and components of the car are all shared by all the teams. So as long as they get the details right, I think that they could be up there. I think probably starting when they are is a good thing. They're coming along just as Gen 3 Evo starts.
Yeah.
So as far as Gen 4 goes, there's a blank slate for everybody to work with. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they're competitive very, very quickly, and if they can get it all hooked up. I wouldn't be surprised if Lola are right up there very soon.
Yeah, and regardless, coming in at this stage, as opposed to waiting for Gen 4, the Gen 3 Evo gives them a chance to just acclimatise to Formula E in general. And as you say, Gen 4 is a blank slate for everybody. So regardless of how they perform in these early stages, they'll hopefully have a bit more of a level playing field for Gen 4, and they'll have experience of being in the championship already at that stage anyway. So hopefully things all go well for them and Lola have success, because it's a name that I think a lot of motorsport fans are fond of. And let's also hope it goes better than when Yamaha was in the back of the 97 Arrows. But yeah, probably a good place to end, touching on the future there after reflecting on sort of the shenanigans of the Misano E-Prix and the surrounding drama and news that came along with it. But Formula E will continue. Next up is the Monaco E-Prix, which is always a good event on the calendar. And it's obviously a quintessential street circuit, so things should hopefully reset to somewhat normality for FE. But Jag, thank you for joining me for this conversation, and listeners, thank you for joining us. Make sure that you continue to listen to Motorsport Speak and like and subscribe. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, you can catch us on YouTube. Make sure you keep up to date with Motorsport Week and Motorsport Monday, because obviously looking ahead, we'll be covering the Formula One Chinese Grand Prix. We have the World Rally Championship back in action with Rally Croatia. We have the Grand Prix of Long Beach, where IMSA and IndyCar will be taken to the iconic Los Angeles circuit. And we also have FIA World Endurance at Imola with their 6-hour endurance event. Make sure you follow at Motorsport Week across all the social channels as well. We have X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, even LinkedIn if you fancy it. But yeah, that's all from me and all from us. Goodbye.